Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you're even in there? Or maybe you've been staring at a screen, reading the exact same paragraph 3 times, and the words are just bouncing right off your brain. Well, look, you absolutely aren't alone, and no, you aren't losing your mind. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are stepping into an elite masterclass on biological optimization. We are going to dive incredibly deep into the high-tech, interconnected systems of the human body to uncover exactly why our mental hardware sometimes glitches out. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how you can completely reboot it.
So we really have to ask the big question here. Why, despite all our incredible evolutionary capabilities, is our cognition just so frequently failing us right now? I mean, we live in an era of intense digital overload, chronic stress, and totally fragmented attention. But here is the secret you need to hear. Brain fog is not a personal failure. It's not a lack of willpower. It's actually a systemic misfire. It's a very real physiological response to an environment that is actively working against our biology. Simply put, your brain is struggling because its fundamental, baseline operating requirements just aren't being met.
In clinical neuroscience, there's actually a specific term for this. We define this experience as subjective cognitive dysfunction. And honestly, just giving it a name helps validate exactly what you've been feeling, right? It is a very real, non-clinical state of mental cloudiness. I want you to think of it not as an illness, and definitely not as some permanent decline, but literally as your brain's vital check engine light. It is your biology flashing a warning sign that there is underlying neuroinflammation, chronic stress, or a systemic metabolic dysfunction happening under the hood that requires some immediate maintenance.
To reclaim our cognitive clarity, we really have to understand this entire interconnected machine. So here's the syllabus for our Systems Biology Masterclass in This Explainer. We're covering 6 key areas: the anatomy of brain fog, hidden nutritional and hormonal drivers, sleep architecture and glymphatic clearance, autonomic balance and vagal tone, rewiring through neuroplasticity, and finally, the actual protocols for cognitive clarity. We're peeling back the layers from raw biological hardware all the way to software rewiring.
Part 1. Anatomy of brain fog. The check engine light.
A staggering 60% of people experience this fog. Now, that is a massive number. This proves it is absolutely not an isolated issue, but a widespread population-level symptom of our modern lifestyle. When we are chronically sleep-deprived, our stress reactivity just amplifies, and that stress completely fractures our decision-making energy, which usually leads us right into passive coping mechanisms, like endless doom scrolling on our phones. And then what happens? That scrolling further destroys our sleep, and the whole cycle just tightens its grip. But realizing that 60% of the population is facing this exact same battle means we can finally address it systemically, rather than through personal shame.
Part 2. Hidden nutritional and hormonal drivers, the hardware. Transitioning to the hardware, we really have to look at the exact fuel you're putting into the machine. We are talking about specific intracellular deficiencies and endocrine disruptions that are quite literally starving your brain of the energy it desperately needs to perform deep work. And here's the kicker: standard medical labs often completely miss these specific intracellular deficits. Take B vitamins. They are the architects of your myelin sheath. That's the vital insulation around your nerves. When you lack B12 or folate, a neurotoxic compound called homocysteine spikes, causing massive brain inflammation. Then we have magnesium, which essentially puts the brakes on your stress receptors. Without enough of it, your neurons become hyperexcitable, leaving you constantly wired and anxious. And ferritin, which is your stored iron, that's the actual oxygen delivery system for your mitochondria. Low ferritin means your brain cells are practically suffocating, leading straight into intense cognitive fatigue.
But it's not just nutrients. Behind the scenes, there is a massive hormonal tug-of-war taking place, especially as we age. On one side, we have estrogen and progesterone. These are the protectors of focus and calm. Progesterone actively drives GABA, which is your brain's primary relaxation neurotransmitter. But pulling hard on the other side of the rope is cortisol, our primary stress hormone. When cortisol is chronically elevated from our chaotic modern lifestyles, it doesn't just make you feel stressed out, it actively shrinks the memory centers of the hippocampus through a process called dendritic atrophy. It's a literal biological battle for your long-term cognitive longevity.
Part 3. Sleep architecture and glymphatic clearance, the clearance system. Now, to understand exactly why that neuroinflammation builds up in the first place, we have to look at the brain's nightly clearance system. This is where your micro-mental health habits directly dictate your physical brain health. I want to introduce you to an absolute miracle of human biology called the glymphatic system. Look, sleep is not just passive rest. It is an incredibly active mechanical flushing of the brain.
During deep, slow-wave sleep, your brain cells literally shrink in size slightly. This allows cerebral spinal fluid to rush in and power wash away metabolic trash, including neurotoxic beta-amyloid proteins. So, if you are accumulating a sleep debt, you are physically leaving toxic garbage behind in your brain tissue. No wonder you wake up feeling foggy.
Activating that nightly wash cycle requires strict circadian synchronization, anchoring your wake time to within a 1-hour variance and immediately manipulating your light exposure by getting natural daylight in your eyes sets a powerful biological timer. It practically guarantees the evening melatonin spike required to drop your brain into that deep, restorative, glymphatic clearance state. Conversely, staring at a blue light screen at 11 p.m. entirely tricks your brain into thinking the sun is still up, which completely halts that vital melatonin release.
Part 4. Autonomic Balance and Vagal Tone, the Software and Wiring.
Moving from sleep over to our nervous system wiring, we really have to address the software running constantly in the background, specifically how chronic stress traps us in an autonomic imbalance, destroying our gut health, our mood, and our focus all at once. And notice how these two autonomic states simply cannot coexist. Sympathetic overdrive is your classic fight or flight state. It completely fractures our decision-making energy and literally shuts down our digestion. I mean, you cannot perform deep work when your biology is convinced you are running from a predator. Compare that to the parasympathetic rest and digest state. Here, systemic inflammation drops, your gut microbiome can actually flourish, and sustained, deep attention is completely restored.
But here's the fascinating part. We are not entirely at the mercy of this autonomic stress loop. We can manually control this switch via the vagus nerve. This is the longest cranial nerve in your entire body, acting as a massive information superhighway that connects your brainstem straight down to your heart, lungs, and gut. By intentionally stimulating the vagus nerve, we can physically hit the brakes on inflammation and panic, instantly forcing the body back into a state of clear, calm cognitive function.
Part 5. Rewiring through neuroplasticity. Upgrading the system.
Look, we aren't just trying to survive the fog here. We want to completely upgrade the system. Consider the sheer power of movement on our biology. Through specific, targeted behaviors, we can actually remodel the brain's physical structure to defend against aging and cognitive decline. We all know exercise builds muscle, right? But sustained aerobic activity is actually linked to a 15% increase in brain volume in memory-related regions like the hippocampus. When you exercise, you release a protein called BDNF, that's brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which acts just like fertilizer for your brain cells, literally helping to grow new neural pathways.
Furthermore, the data shows that repeated movement sessions lead to a massive 30% reduction in measurable cognitive decline over time. By increasing cerebral perfusion, which is just a fancy term for the flow of oxygen-rich blood directly into your brain tissues, you are actively washing away metabolic noise. You're building a highly resilient cognitive reserve that will fiercely protect your brain decades into the future.
Part 6. Protocols for Cognitive Clarity, the Practical Protocol.
Okay, so how do we actually integrate all of this interconnected biology into actionable, real-world habits? We've covered the systems, the hardware, and the software, and the science is incredibly clear here. Instead of exhausting, heroic 2-hour workouts that you inevitably quit after a week, the biology demands structured consistency. Schedule tiny 6 to 12-minute movement microblocks daily. This is what keeps that cerebral perfusion high. Add just a couple of 20 to 30-minute aerobic sessions a week to build up that hippocampal volume. And crucially, integrate 60-second paced breathing resets, inhaling for 4 counts and exhaling for 6. That longer exhale manually stimulates the vagus nerve, reliably cutting through the fog right before you need to drop into deep, focused work.
You definitely want to keep this vagus nerve stimulation toolkit handy at all times. When the fog rolls in, you need immediate interventions. A simple cold water face plunge triggers the mammalian dive reflex, instantly redirecting oxygenated blood straight to your vital organs and brain. Humming or singing physically vibrates the vocal cords, which are directly connected to the vagus nerve. Even a simple 5 senses check-in pulls you right out of a sympathetic stress loop and grounds your attention. These are fast, immediate biological hacks to restore your clarity on demand.
I want to close this explainer with a provocative thought from Dr. Andrew E. Budson. He reminds us that the brain is not a static organ slowly declining over time. It is a highly adaptable, interconnected, incredible machine. Every single choice you make, the nutrients you consume, the boundaries you place on your sleep, the micro movements you do at your desk, actively wires your brain. So what small choice will you make today to build the cognitive longevity you want tomorrow?